Hey, business builder. So we're doing virtual campfire today, and it's always great to feature members of the business builder group and for the other people that have shown up today to be able to make the conversation work a little bit better. I appreciate you. It's always a great time when we're together and I set aside everything that's going on around me and turn my phone off and get immersed in the world of growth and intentional living and creation of a business. And that's what we're going to do today. Scott has told me about one of the tools that he uses, one of the methods he uses to dream ahead, think ahead, and create the future. And it's this process that he's going to share with us today on 100 goals and 100 dreams and what it takes to write all those things down. And so, Scott, I'm gonna not steal any of your thunder or work ahead. I'll turn it over to you, and you just let me know how I can help as we go through this today.
Okay. All right. Well, everybody's, I think, I don't know if Kane had a chance to take a look at it. So maybe just flash either one of the two because they're both pretty identical. Okay. Thanks. So yeah. So everybody has a look at this, and you can turn it off now. And as I go through this, I'd like this to be interactive. So anybody, feel free to interject or stop me at any point. I don't want this to be a monologue. I'd like everybody to kind of get into the swing of it. This is a tool that I was introduced to about 2-3 years ago, and I've found it to be kind of a game changer for me because it really helped me discover a lot about myself and think a lot more about, my impact in the world. And there's two of these. There's 100 goals and there's 100 successes. And one looks backward, one looks forward. And, as I began to take this on, my first inclination is, oh, this is going to be really easy. And I began to fill it out. And I think with 100 goals, I got to about 20. And then I started getting stumped. And I'm sorry, with 100 successes, I got to about 20 and I started getting stumped. And then with 100 goals, I got to about 30 and then I got stumped. And, even today, I haven't gotten to 100. So this is something that I keep on my desk. I refer to it almost all the time as I'm thinking about what I might want to do over a weekend. I refer to it. Hey, maybe I can knock one of these things off this weekend. So for me, the 100 successes, I started out with some of the easy stuff like, oh, I graduated high school. I made the dean's list. I was confirmed. I got married. I got divorced. To me, that was a win. I bought a business. I exited a business. So, though I had 2 kids. So those, became the easy ones. And then I got stumped. I'm like, whoa, what have I really done? And as I began to think about it, I realized for myself that I set such lofty goals for myself that it almost became impossible for me to fill these out because I would set these pie in the sky goals for myself. And when I got them, it was just one goal. And now I'm talking about goals. I may flip back and forth, but so I started talking about, as I started looking at the goals, I set these massive lofty goals for myself. And I realized, wait a minute, to get to some of these goals, I got to break it down into smaller pieces. Like, if I want to climb this ladder, I got to get to the 5th rung and the 10th rung. And then I began to identify some of those things. For instance, there's a ski run out here called Temerity. It's a beast. And I've gotten to the top of this thing probably 15 times and chickened out. Like, no, there's no way I'm going to get to the bottom of this thing and still be breathing. But it's on my list. So like every time I get to the top of that thing, I think, okay, I'm going to tackle it. But then I realize, you know what? I got to do these there's some other runs that are pretty damn hard. And in order to build up to this, I got to do these. So I started putting these other runs on the list so I could build up to get to Temerity, and there's 3 or 4 of them. And I tackled them last year, and once I did that, I was able to put these on my accomplishments. Okay, I did that. And the important thing for me, and for a lot of people, is to really celebrate. Okay, I did it. I got it. I did it. What am I going to do to celebrate? And for me, it doesn't have to be anything big. It could be I go out and have some Himalayan food or something that I really love, just to celebrate that I've done something and knocked it off the list. One other thing I did last summer was there's a 9-mile hike, which is pretty vertical. It's about, I don't know, 1,500-foot vertical, and it ends up at what they call Crystal Mill, which is, it goes up this river, and there's this old 150-year-old mill. Wayne's been there. And that was something I put on my list that, okay, I'm going to tackle. And I woke up on a Saturday morning, got out there first thing, I was the first person on the trail, and I got up there by about 10:30 before all the cars started coming up. It's like a goat trail. It's pretty intense to try and hike this thing, but cars come up, and I don't know how they do it, but I was able to hike it. I brought my nice business builder thermos, which stayed cold the whole time. It was pretty impressive. And a lunch, and I packed a lunch and sat up there and ate it and hiked back down. So that was something that I accomplished. And then, and then there's business goals that I try to do. And what I try to do is I'll set a goal for myself. One of my goals this year is to build $300,000, but it's got to be by the end of the year. Now, I may or may not hit that, but it's my goal. And, the fact that I've set a time date on it has forced me, number one, to put a little bit of pressure on myself, but number two, to accept that wherever I get, I get. If I get 3/4 of the way there, I can pretty much accept that, because I'm on my real way to that goal, and I can hit it next year or come up with a different goal. So I'm going to stop here for a second, see if anybody has any comments or questions, and then we can talk a little bit about, what it's all about, to talk about your accomplishments.
I wrote down number one success. I've been to the Crystal Mill, and
You drove that thing.
I drove there, and it was super scary.
I can't believe anybody would do that in a car, but I see people do that. Oh my God.
Yeah, my wife wasn't real happy with me that day.
Yeah.
Scott,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. So the question is, when you list out your goals, if you were to break down the percentage of short-term versus midterm versus long-term goals, is there like a mix or a blend that you recommend, or is it just kind of like, hey, just go as you please kind of thing?
Well, again, this is where your perspective kind of comes into play. Like, a long-term goal is great. And as you do that, what's helped me is to say, okay, my long-term goal is going to be a big goal. And what do I need to do to get there? What are the steps I need to do? So then I'll start to add into the steps. Like, okay, for instance, a long-term goal for me, sorry, let me just refer. I have some personal debt. So, when I bought my house, I have a couple $1 million worth of debt. So my long-term debt is to eliminate my debt. Okay, I want to get to that point where I want to eliminate it. But last year I drove my debt down under. I eliminated almost $400,000 of debt. That was huge. I'm not going to get there in a year. So if I can say, hey, by January 1st, 2026, I can get down to $1.5 million, that would be a massive win for me. So, those are some of the things, and it keeps it top of mind for me. And even there, I would break it down even further. By next year, I want to be down to this level. So, I'm in position the year after, to eliminate that. So
Thank you. Good point.
Scott, can you speak to looking back at some of those successes? Like you mentioned, you graduated high school. Like, I never looked back further than maybe the year. And I'm just curious what that does for you. What, is that a building block for hey, I accomplished this. It's something else I've done in my life. It's something you reflect on. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So thank you for the question. For me, like, as I look back, it's kind of an acknowledgement for me, like, okay, this is who I am. This is what I've accomplished. I mean, I did things. I have things on there from my childhood. When I won a basketball league. I hit the winning shot. In fifth grade. We won the basketball league and the championship. To me, that was an accomplishment. Do I think about it often? No. Do I reflect? But it's part of who I am. When I was in high school, I went through a rough time my freshman year, and you know, and I my first semester I brought home this deplorable report card, which I was ashamed of, and and I turned it around. Like I almost failed my algebra class, and I got in the study group, and all of a sudden, I'm getting hundreds on all my tests, and I'm having my algebra teacher look over my shoulder every test, that making sure I'm not cheating. But to me, and I ended up getting the top grade in the class, and so to me that was a big accomplishment. It was something that I proved to myself and that I did, and it's part of who I am. And then now it's a case of saying, okay, you know, as I list these goals out and as I achieve them, they go in my accomplishments. I mean, it's important. It's something to acknowledge. It's something it's something to reward any of us. I say myself, but it could be anybody. It's something to reward ourselves for, that we've accomplished something, and it's something to build on, that we can build on those wins for ourselves. And it's just a great way to live intentionally.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
When you were going over the accomplishments or the successes, right? So the terms are goals and successes. And you said you had a hard time writing them down. And of course, part of me wants to say, I could totally do that. But I started trying to write some, and I can see and feel it's not as easy as you might think. Some of you have heard me talk about Ankush Jain, the coach, and he was the one that put together the powerful men's immersion that I went to in Southern England a few years ago for 6 days. And Ankush went and worked with this coach, Steve Hardison, in Arizona. And one of the topics that they worked on, well, I think it was the topic they worked on, was that Ankush said he has a hard time accepting the acknowledgement of other people. So if anybody acknowledges him, he has a hard time with that. Like, a hard time taking compliments, a hard time knowing what to do with that. And I think a lot of us, that I saw Kane nodding, like that resonates with me. And so Steve Hardison helped him with an exercise of how to become more comfortable with accepting acknowledgements of others, but then also sent him home on the plane with an exercise to do where he had him fill up a whole tablet with acknowledgements of himself, which sounds a lot like recording successes. And he had a hard time filling out the tablet, and it led to a lot of tears and crying and emotion as he worked to do that. So I wrote down this, not necessarily, maybe it's a rhetorical question, but maybe you have an idea. And it's two things. Why is it hard to acknowledge our own successes? Why would that be? And the second thing is, why is it important to acknowledge our own successes?
No, those are really, really powerful questions. And I mean, I can speak to myself, because really doing this exercise and really recording your successes really speaks directly to what you just asked. It is really difficult to fully own ourselves. And let me talk about myself. It's been really difficult for me to fully own myself and fully own my impact as a man, as a person, as a father, as a business person. I've had a lot of successes. I mean, I've had a good run. But, when I really think about, some of these things, and even now as I'm speaking about being a good father, there's probably 12 or 13 things I could put on there about, the successes I've had as a parent, but I haven't acknowledged that for myself yet. And it's really important. And, I know when I work with clients a lot, I try to subtly acknowledge them during the times I'm with them. And sometimes they'll say, oh yeah, you probably say that to everybody, or you're blowing smoke up my ass, or something like that. And I'll call them out on it. Hey, what does it look like for you to really get yourself, get who you are? And it's a very, very I think for me, it's been a difficult road. Your second question was, I'm sorry.
Why is it important? Why do you think it? Because I think some of us would my brains, I don't know where this comes from, right? But don't be an egomaniac, or the last thing the world needs is for me to own my own successes, like get over myself and keep going. There's some kind of messaging like that. But why is it important to? And I'm you did this with there was a name at the top of it. So maybe there's even like some theory that they shared with you for why it's important.
No, not really. But to me, and please, this is a conversation, not a lecture. So anybody feel free to jump in. But for me, it kind of ties into gratitude. Like, why is it important to have gratitude? For the same reason it's important to not fully acknowledge what we've accomplished and what we've done, and what we've meant to people, and what our, and what our impact has been. I mean, Jamie, you shared the other day about, how this holiday season you really got to spend time with your kids, and you really fully enjoyed being with your family. Well, to me, that's like a huge accomplishment. And there's probably a lot of meaning there for you when you said that.
%. Yeah. One of the things I was thinking about in your questions, Wayne, is it's for me personally, it's difficult to sometimes look at those accomplishments or achievements. I think in part because I just try to be as humble as I possibly can. And you don't want to feed, there's certainly an ego there, but you don't want to feed that ego to become something that you don't want to be. But although I do understand that it is important to acknowledge them, because you have to have some type of ego to be successful. I don't think you can walk around super humble and be successful unless maybe Dalai Lama, or I don't know. I don't have that.
You know what? I think you can. I think, when you read the story of Sam Walton, extremely humble man, built an empire. And, I think if we can look at it through the lens of gratitude, it makes it possible to be humble and still acknowledge ourselves for what we've accomplished. Yeah, go ahead.
I think from my perspective, we go into business and we push for leadership roles and we push for accomplishments, and it's something that starts from inside of us. We don't set these goals to prove anything to outsiders, to prove anything to an audience. We do it because we're driven from something inside of us, some entrepreneurial spirit or something. And I know that from my perspective, like, I see it as being driven the way that I am. I'm never going to be satisfied. So once I get to a goal, it's just on to the next one. There's no big celebration and here I am and now I've arrived and it's all over. It's just like, okay, got that done. What's next? On to the next thing. And because that comes from inside, right? Again, we're not doing it for an audience. We're not putting ourselves on display so that people could celebrate what we're accomplishing. I think we don't see ourselves as that hero. And taking some time to reflect on that, realize that we are people's heroes. Like as simple as the people that live in our homes, right? Our wives and our kids, our spouses, to some of our friends, right? To a lot of our friends who aren't as driven as we are and aren't pushing to accomplish things the way that we are. And then certainly the people that we're affecting through our work. And there are definitely people all around us that are looking up to us. And taking some time to go back, Scott, I think, and look on those successes might help us gain an appreciation, right? For how far we've come and all the things that we've done. I think that's an important exercise for people that are as driven as, I mean, everybody that I see here in the meeting.
You know, you touched on something, and first of all, really, really excellent points. And you touched on something, and I'd like to get back to leadership in a second, but you touched on something that resonates with me, because last week we got into breakout rooms, and I was in a breakout room with Kim, and I was kind of saying the same thing that you were, like when I had my company, and I think back on it, I was just on this ladder, and I just kept climbing and climbing and climbing, you know. And what we talked about was drawing that out, and I'm actually a graphic artist to do this, but drawing out that ladder and putting a landing on, you know, maybe one plateau with maybe a bed and, you know, a TV or, you know, a swimming pool or something like that. And then building a second, you know, tier with, you know, maybe a garden or, you know, I mean, it's something I have to visualize a little bit better, but the point is building those plateaus for ourselves where we say, okay, we've gotten here. Let's rest, let's celebrate, let's recharge, and let's think about getting to the next tier. And that's, you know, I mean, that's something that I really struggled with, you know, in my journey as an entrepreneur. And it's something I want to embrace a little bit more now, is really, you know, celebrating those wins and being able to acknowledge that I've gotten there and look at, you know, get clarity on what the next one looks like. So, Kane, when you look at yourself as a leader, you know, what are some of the wins that you've had?
Well, career-wise, you know, I can sum it up in the role that I have today. I started at my company, Scott, at an entry-level position right out of high school, and 3.5 years ago bought the company. So I've worked from that level, you know, and proven myself through work and through loyalty to the company that I was worthy of promotions, that I was worthy of responsibility and position. And when the last owner of the company was retiring, and he looked around at what his succession was going to be, he felt very comfortable passing the company off to me and to my partner. And that's a big deal, right? And I don't, until I share the story with people that aren't in my world, right, that aren't in business ownership world, I don't necessarily even realize how big of a story that is, like how much of an accomplishment that is. Because most of the people in my life, most of the people in all of our lives are people who will work for an organization or for somebody for the rest of their careers. They won't have the opportunity or take the opportunity or create the opportunity to move to the next level. So that's an accomplishment, Scott.
So let me just
Go ahead.
project here for a second and kind of give you a reflection of what I see here, because this is kind of what I went through when I started this whole exercise. Because I looked at, you know, I built a company, sold it. You know, for me, that was life defining, massive. But, you know, when I started this exercise, I didn't look at all the steps that I took to get there. I didn't look at closing deals with 25 colleges. And I didn't write that down. I didn't look at, you know, having to fire half my work staff at one point because they all banded together and they were, you know, they were being completely counterproductive to what we're doing, and, you know, and having to build my team back together again and building a great team. I didn't look at all that stuff. And it wasn't until I really started to reflect at all the steps that I really got fully. I haven't quite gotten fully what I've done yet, but I started to get fully what I did in building that company and getting to the point of exit. So I would invite you, you know, if you want to take this on, to really look at all the steps that you took to get to that point where you could actually buy that company, because that's a massive accomplishment.
Thanks. And I will. I like this. like this perspective on one looks forward and one is looking backwards. I really do like that perspective.
So I'm sorry, I interrupted you and I apologize for that, but I know you were in the kind of mid-thought, so I'd like you to
Oh, and
continue.
I was just gonna go on to say, and then personally in my personal life, just the person that I've been able to grow into. My background, my childhood wasn't great. And the way that I was raised was very similar to the way that my father was raised. And I wasn't sure at one point after I had met my wife and knew that I was in love and I wanted to pursue a deep relationship with her. I wasn't sure that I was marriage material, just based on the way that my father grew up and the way that I grew up. And I had to do some soul searching and reach out for some help to make sure that I was the kind of person that could get married and be a husband and be a father. And that journey started 20 years ago. And now, I've been married for 17 years and I got 2 beautiful kids and a wonderful relationship with my wife and with my kids. And so that's a success to me too, because I'm at an age now, Scott, at 47, where the people in my life who didn't make the best decisions when they chose their partners, or maybe not when they chose their partners or when they entered into marriage, like they didn't do the deep work that was necessary to make sure that it was right for them. And now those marriages are all breaking up. Mistakes happen and things happen, but seeing close friends of mine's marriages fall apart gives me a lot of gratitude for how serious I took the decision, so many years ago.
Well, again, as you look at this, I mean, you didn't just, you didn't just become that person who could become a family man, overcome some of the things that you did in your childhood. You probably took some big steps in your childhood and adolescence to get to where you are. And those would be, again, I would invite you, if you do this exercise, to really look at those and list those out for yourself.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
So Wayne, what are you getting out of this conversation so far?
Well, what I was going to ask before Kane started talking, I was going to ask this, but then when Kane said, really filled in some of what I was kind of thinking. I was going to ask if anybody else was actually sitting here trying to write some down, because that's what I've been doing. I've been working on a list as we're sitting here, like to see what it feels like. And on successes, I started there first, but I'm up to 16. And what I'm feeling as I'm writing that is just to give you all, I'm answering my own question, I guess, for why would you do this? And I'm also thinking, I'm working with one of the guys that just went behind me. I'm working with Spencer Howell's company, and some of the leaders of the company are over there in the meeting room. And sometime between the day and tomorrow, I want to bring this up to them and work this a little bit with them. So naturally, I'm thinking, and I saw Matt just nod, like I'm thinking, all right, well, what would be the utility of doing this with maybe my son too, for that fact? He's only 15, but we could do this. I think this would be good for him. And I'm feeling as I go through it, like momentum, Scott, would be the word that comes to mind. Like as I write successes, it gives momentum and makes me want to do more. Like not do more, but I wrote down, took my daughter on a mission trip, specifically Michaela Madeline. I've done that with, but as I wrote it down, I'm giving myself credit for having done it, but also I'm going to go over the goal list and be like, you know what, I need to take Thomas. So I'm not getting stuck in a place of like, oh, wow, hey, everybody, I took my daughter on a mission trip. Like, but rather it's write that down and go, oh yeah, that was good. That feels good. Momentum then says, and let's do it with, I don't know. That's what I'm feeling something as I'm writing it, so I can see how it's useful and helpful.
Well, I mean, you've had, from the times we've talked and things you've shared, you've had this incredible journey as well with overcoming
Oh, it's true.
Yeah, I mean, you've overcome alcoholism and you've set your
Thought
wife
about that.
in a whole different place. And, I mean, a lot of people would look at that and say, well, they might get judgmental about that. But, if you're in the throes of it and you've overcome it, that's a massive, massive accomplishment. And my guess is there were several plateaus and steps that you had to take to get there. And you're still, and you're still getting there.
He's shaking his head.
Go ahead.
It's funny because I think we all have challenges. I think a lot of the utility of an exercise like this is that we all have challenges with buying into what our successes are, because we're real easy to call ourselves, aside from old blind spots, we're real easy to call ourselves on our shortcomings, and I was thinking as you were speaking, Wayne, and perhaps others, the word momentum really was what was going through my head too, is that when you're in the zone, when you're doing what you do and you do it really, really well, it's because you're feeling it. You're feeling all that level of confidence, accomplishment, all those things that lead to goal setting and goal accomplishment, and having the exercise, because it's easy to say, man, what did I not do yesterday or last month or last year? But man, when you sit down and take an inventory and look what you actually did do, generally speaking, I can say confidently for everyone on this call that that's a much longer list. We all have areas where maybe we didn't hit where we wanted to hit, but that the list of good and the list of positive and the list of accomplishment is much longer than our shortfalls or our underperformance at times.
Yeah, Hugh, I love what you just said. And to me, it kind of speaks to how we judge ourselves and how we judge others. And, once we can begin to say, hey, you know what, maybe I didn't hit my goal, but I really worked at it and I really tried. And this is what came out of that. That can be a great learning lesson. And, and it can help us be a little softer on the judgment of ourselves and others as well. Matt, I'm curious, what are you thinking about this whole process?
So I would say my main struggle has to do with the acknowledgement of successes. I mean, my lifelong goal is kind of a journey of humility of getting there. There's never, well, I should say, you're never going to get there. That's probably the number one problem if you think we're humble. Well, probably the actual opposite. So yeah, I mean, I guess from a successes perspective, I don't know. I have not documented them. I'm all for looking ahead and planning ahead and setting goals, but not necessarily acknowledging them. So it's kind of, I mean, the more I've learned about myself too, is I'm more of a futuristic thinker. I'm not, which makes it challenging for me to look back and take time to just, like, I literally have to schedule time to reflect. So I think, I don't know, I guess there's a side of me where when I set goals, I expect to make them. So I don't know, I guess I'm not saying I didn't make a big deal about them, but I've not really taken the time to document them. I guess partially is I'm setting the expectations high, but also too, I don't know, I've not wanted to take credit for any of those successes.
How could really thinking about and documenting and owning some of your successes really affect your goals in the future?
Good question. I guess I wouldn't know until I do it first. So there's the challenge. I think first it would force me to do more reflection, because that is a big challenge just from a mental perspective. I want to move on to the next thing and tackle the next challenge. So I think it could possibly help by reflecting and recognizing and acknowledging some of those goals being met or successes being met. Probably could help from a visionary perspective of looking into what's next or further down the road, the goal setting part of it. And you said, and actually I asked you this question at the very beginning, and it just kind of is coming to me now, is, I asked you about, setting long-term goals, and I really liked your response, which was, well, yeah, it's good to set, well, this is how I interpreted it. It's good to set long-term goals, but also too, you got to break them down into bite-sized pieces where there might be the midterm and then there might be the short term, because it's setting long-term goals. It's a journey when we have a long-term goal, because a long-term goal is not something necessarily that's a next year kind of thing. It might be 5 years from now, it might be 10 years from now, but the successes are, all right, well, in year one of the 10-year goal, did we meet the goal? So I think, to answer your question, acknowledging that success is a part of the journey to getting to that long-term goal.
So when I think about this, and the successes and the goals, there's both personal and professional goals. And I'm curious for everybody, how do they dovetail for you guys? How do they feed on one another?
For me, I think we just kind of talked about this the other day, Scott, with what's your why? Family is always the top of the list, and those personal goals and professional goals always seem to be, I'm driving towards what's going to be best for my family, what's going to have some success in, or building some success for my children and things like that. So for me, I think it's that blending of the two, personal and business, into, okay, this is what drives my my actions.
As you were saying that, what I started thinking about was, one of my goals as a parent, is to see, my son and my daughter, grow up to be intentional adults, responsible adults, intentional, have integrity. Those are the things that were really important to me as a parent. And to do that, to help them do that, I felt like I had to live in a certain way, deal with them in a certain way, deal with them with honesty and to the best of my ability. And that was a long-term goal. It's still playing out, I mean, they're still growing and they're still becoming, growing into adulthood, but it's still playing out. But yeah, that was a long-term goal. But to get there, I still have to be intentional about, hey, what are the things I say to them? How do I act toward them? How do I guide them, at certain junctures? So how do I act without judgment to the best of my ability toward them? So go ahead.
Got it.
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
Mike.
So I've shared a lot with y'all about letter writing and letter to yourself at New Year. And I'm in the process of writing the next one. I used to just do it all in one sitting. I would I read the year before, wrote it, done. I'm finding that this better not stretch out too much, or it's going to take like a week in the future to do it or something. But I have 8 letters from the past now stacked up, and I read through all of them. So it's so interesting as a habit. It's not just interesting, I'm quite certain that this is another one of those momentum building things. But I looked at a 2016 letter, what I wrote in 2016, what I wrote in 17, so on and so forth. And now I'm working on the 2024 edition that'll be open in 25. And so that is a habit, a tool, or a system that I'm using that works for me, brings joy, brings gratitude, brings recognition of the good stuff that has happened in the last year, brings realizing that many years at the end of the year, I'm feeling like next year, I don't know, this next year is the year where the wheels are going to fall off the bus or something. Like I get some sort of weird dread at the end of the year, combined with excitement. And reading those letters has helped me. So it's my practice. This is a practice of yours. And what I felt on this call is just by starting to do it, I felt that could helpful, and there's momentum. So in what I'd like to know is just a little bit more about your practice with this. Have you ever gotten to the 100 mark on either of the lists or on both of them? Have you gotten it to 100? And then how are you moving things as if it's a goal and then it happens? Do you then rewrite it on the success list? Is that how you use this? And or do you revisit it annually, or just like, what's that process for you?
For me, I keep this on my desk. I keep this on a file on my desk. So I see it every day. I try to open it every day. And no, I've never gotten to 100, but when I do list a success and I achieve it, yeah, or when I list a goal and I achieve it, it goes on my success list. And like I'll be on the ski lift and I'll think, oh, wait a minute, I had a success, or this was something. Even today when we were talking about our kids, yeah, I'm gonna list probably 5 or 10 successes I've had with my son. And I was taking him to tennis tournaments all over the country and coaching him, and that was some of those were really, really great successes for me, and I've never really taken the time to acknowledge it. Like, this is who I've been as a father. So, yeah, I mean, it's something that keeping it here, keeping it next to me, keeps it top of mind for me, and keeps it, it keeps it fresh. And one of the other things I use it for is the things that I really fear doing. If it's something I really fear doing, it's going to go on that goal list, and that makes it intentional for me, where I can conquer a fear that I've had.
What's the craziest goal anyone wrote down? Biggest goal?
I can tell you craziest. I want to, well, number one on my list was live to 93. But I've also got, I want to take a trip to Borneo, and I don't know why. It's just been a wild hair up my ass for forever. I want to go to Borneo. My wife won't go with me, but one of these days I'm going to get on a plane and I'm going to go. So
I wrote down run a 10K race when I'm 80. That's my current thing that's in my head, because there's this particular 10K trail race I do, and I've seen 80-plus-year-olds do that. I'm like, that's a good goal.
in that vein, there was a Japanese woman who was either 85 or 86, and she climbed Mount Everest. She became the oldest person ever to climb Mount Everest and summit. And the next year, someone who was like 4 months older than her did it. So she went back 2 years later and did it again, like at 88, because she wanted to be the oldest person ever to do it.
6 minutes left. Anybody else have? Thanks, Scott. I appreciate you sharing a tool like this with us and your experience with it.
No, thank you. It was meaningful for me. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Anybody else have the last word? Anything they want to say?
Yeah, just touch on, Scott, one thing I took from you there too is get your kids involved while you can in just the goal setting side of things, to be a part of their journey, because that I think could be, in the future, some successes is being a part of kids' journey to helping them hit some of their goals, and also to establishing some good practices. So, I mean, that's something that we're doing with our kids this year. So thank you for sharing that, because that was one of your goals, as you had mentioned, your kids and helping them in their journey.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for bringing it up.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thanks
Thanks,
for
Scott.
joining us, Scott. We appreciate you showing up and sharing yet another way to live intentionally. So, and you all make it better. We're together. So appreciate you.
Okay.
Awesome.
All
Happy
right.